so I opened it and climbed through. Not a sight of Rosa anywhere, but a large, red patch on her bed. Halloween is a prime time to get a date or two. All in the holiday spirit, of course. This girl on Instagram had caught my eye. Her name was Rosa, and I figured that now would probably be the best chance, if any. I was real subtle with it, a quick bite over at my place, maybe a movie or two. To my delight, she was down to meet at my place. With the cushions and blankets prepared, food ready, and strategically placing the smaller couch in front of the TV, I was ready for some go time. I knew that the movie we watched made no difference. It was just gonna be background noise, so I put on some horror flick from the 80s I had lying around, Friday the 13th. I never found it particularly scary. I was too used to recent movies that were filled with jump scares. There was a knock on my door, and I greeted Rosa. She was dressed pretty moderately, to my disappointment, but I put that thought aside as we snuggled up on the couch. An hour went by with complete awkward silence. To my surprise, Rosa was very into the movie, a bit too much for my taste. Weren't we here for one thing? At every little loud noise, she would jump and I'd find myself wondering if it really had been a good idea to put on the movie. She jumped again, much more startled, but this time, it was from a loud banging at the door. I sighed, and left her on the couch. She was entranced by the TV screen as Jason Voorhees slashed his victims. Opening it, I was greeted by the sight of a gaggle of kids. They all surged forwards, thrusting their candy bags forward with the customary trick or treat. I sighed, and gave them all some candy I had stowed away on the side, knowing there'd be some kids approaching the house, even without decorations and the massive sign I had posted saying, "No trick or treaters, get lost." When the last of them had been given their dose, I noted another kid waiting further behind. He was hard to make out, but his silhouette was taller, probably some teenager paid to watch over a group of younger kids. I gave him no mind, and slammed the door. When I got back to the living room, I noticed that Rosa was getting ready to leave. She had apparently seen Jason Voorhees outside, and was scared. I scoffed, but when she shot me a scowl, I knew she was just making up an excuse to leave. When I offered to drive her home, she seemed somewhat relieved. The whole ride there, we were silent, a mumbled thanks when we got there, and that was it. It was a pretty awkward first date, to be honest. That's when the sightings began. The next night, I received a phone call from her. I was elated, thinking that I had another opportunity. I was shocked when all I heard was distressed sobbing and crying on the other end. When I asked what was happening, she'd just bawl out an incoherent mess, but I managed to pick out the word Voorhees. I held back from sighing and assured her that it was just a movie. To that, she stopped and then began screaming about how she had really seen him and that he was on her patio. Naturally, I offered to come over. I was there in 10 minutes, and of course, I saw nobody on the patio. Using a spare key she had told me was under the rug, I stupidly came into her room unannounced. Rosa screamed, white as chalk, nail marks down her arms and hair bedraggled. When I eventually calmed her down, she crawled into her bed, without a word. Despite the mood, I tried to comfort her as I just sat in the room, silent again, until she was sound asleep. I drove home in a foul mood. Again, the following night. This time when I got a call from Rosa, the screaming was more profound and loud. I drove more slowly this time, thinking of how to get her out of this mess. Once more, I stayed with her until sleep slowly crept up on Rosa. Before leaving, I gave the premises a good check. I promised myself that I'd find a solution to this problem I had probably caused. It wasn't until maybe the 5th night that it came to me, when the screaming on the other end of the line became unbearable, the sobbing, animalistic. I feared the worst, thinking I had made the wrong move in watching a horror movie on a date. She said something that she hadn't said before though, "He's going to kill me." And with that the phone cut. I dashed to my car, bringing my pistol with me. I'm certain I had broken the speed limit the way I was driving so recklessly. When I finally got there, all the lights were out, the door locked. I climbed up onto the patio roof and made my way to her window. Knocking, I got no response, so I opened it and climbed through. Not a sight of Rosa anywhere, but a large, red patch on her bed. The sweat clung to my face, heart racing as I crept downstairs. I checked every room, pointing the gun forward in anticipation. Nothing. The silence was chilling. At last, I made my way into the kitchen. And there she was, lying flat down in a puddle of her own blood, knife marks all across. I tried shaking her awake desperately, calling her name. I didn't notice the footsteps behind me. Click, clack, click, clack. I looked around at the last moment and yelled out as Jason Voorhees raised his machete. Without a second thought, I began firing desperately at him. Inside the house, the noise was deafening, each thud signifying a bullet hit. The first sign of things going wrong was when Rosa suddenly awoke with a scream. She tried to push me aside, but I didn't stop there. I picked up the machete and began slashing at Jason. My vision was all but a red haze as the smell of blood came pouring out of the corpse. It was only about 2 minutes later that I realized what I had done. Rosa pushed me off of her brother. She was in tears as she tried desperately to stem the blood rushing from the many wounds. I was in disbelief, wide-eyed as she yelled at me to call an ambulance. What the hell was going on? As it had turned out, it was all just an elaborate prank. Rosa and her brother had been planning it for weeks and kept it going until tonight. It was cruel and pointless, and now I sit here in my cell, waiting for the jury to come to a decision. Doesn't help that I had killed him in such a brutal manner. There's no way that could be considered self-defense. I'm branded as a child killer, but what worries me the most is the blood on my hands. It never washes away, no matter how hard I scrub. It never goes away.
Hey guys, it's Rai here. It seems like a lot of you guys are enjoying my content, but a small percentage of you are actually subscribed. So I would really appreciate it if you subscribe. Thank you so much for the support. And now, back to the show.
This happened when I was 16. It was Halloween in my small town of South Louisiana. It was a crisp night. The temperature was in the mid-80s, and the heat showed no sign of slacking off. I was walking around with my older sister and our friend Brooke. My sister had gone as a cat, and Brooke had gone as a witch. I had made the awful decision of wearing a formal gown, since I decided to go as a zombie prom queen. I had a crown and everything. I was drowning in that dress though. It was so hot, and the corset back was restricting my breathing. It was around 8:40, and all of the kids were pretty much cleared out of the street. We were making our way to the park next to City Hall, where my mother was supposed to pick us up. We were supposed to be there for 9. The three of us were about 6 blocks away at this point, and my sister had stopped to talk to a friend of hers. I was not stopping though. It was close to time for my mum to pick us up, and I wasn't going to be late. I was also miserable in that stupid dress and wanted to go home. I had carried on for almost 2 blocks before I'd noticed that both my sister and her friend had stayed behind. I was annoyed, to say the least, but I only had 4 more blocks to go, and I could lay down in my mother's minivan. Being alone in the dark was starting to give me the creeps. The yellow streetlights didn't do the ambience any favors. I'd kept my pace and kept walking, until I heard the rumble of a muffler coming up behind me. I moved all the way off the road. The large black truck came past very quickly and turned to the left in front of me. I passed the intersection, and I only had 3 blocks left. Then I heard the truck again. I'd never moved back on the road, so I didn't bother looking back. It wasn't too strange that the same truck had passed again. The third time they passed, though, they slowed for a good 30 seconds or so, and that's what scared me. I didn't recognize the truck, and the windows were tinted heavily. As soon as I thought I could see a bit of a face, they peeled out and disappeared around a corner. I made another block before I heard the truck again. I was 2 blocks away from my ride, and I was scared and started running. I already couldn't breathe because of the dress and was terrified I would pass out. As soon as I heard the truck, my stomach wrenched. I still kept going, only a good bit faster than I had been. I kept my eyes down and watched my own shadows as the headlights came closer. I heard the brakes and I had made the decision to run. But I was too late. I realized how close they were to me. I felt a sharp pain on the back of my head, and I looked up the best I could to see an arm sticking out of the window. An eagle clutching a sword was tattooed on his upper forearm. He had my hair wrapped around his fist. Before I could really comprehend the situation, he pumped the gas and was dragging me alongside of his truck. I was running as best I could, clawing his arm, crying and screaming. The only thing that kept running through my mind was that if I tripped, I was going to be run over. This man was just laughing. I was completely helpless. As soon as it started, he let me go. I fell to my knees on the asphalt, tore my dress, skinned my palms, and my scalp was on fire. I was inconsolable, and I was hyperventilating. I stood up, wiped my face, then looked around and felt absolutely violated. I looked back at the way I'd come from and realized that this man had dragged me by my hair for a whole block and a half. Once I caught my head, I ran across the street to the park. My mother was nowhere to be seen. I climbed into the enclosed slide and just curled up and cried. I don't know how long I was lying there for before I heard my mother calling my name. I came out and she was walking up the street calling for me. I walked over to her and she looked me up and down and began freaking out. Apparently, I had blood on my face and dress from my hands. She ran to me and was asking me what happened and kept looking me up and down for a gash or something worse. I couldn't find my voice. I just held onto her and cried. We spent the next few hours at the police station filling out a report. Long story short, nothing ever came of it. My sister got into trouble with my parents for not being at the city hall on time. She was grounded. My mother had actually left City Hall to go and look for us. She found my sister where I left her, and my sister hadn't even realized that I never stayed. I got in trouble for not staying with my sister, but I didn't get grounded. I'm still pretty mad that the dress was ruined and I lost the damned crown. I'm even angrier that the man was never caught. This Halloween, I will be out with my godchild trick-or-treating. It'll be the first one that I've gone out for in the 9 years since it happened.